two fighter jets, both capable of exceeding the speed of sound, both armed with missiles that can lock onto a target from beyond visual range. And yet, when they end up in close proximity, neither one flies straight. They curve, they climb, they reverse direction. They bleed speed on purpose. If speed is the defining advantage of a fighter jet, why would any pilot ever choose not to use it? That question sounds simple. The answer reveals an entire system of physics, geometry, and decision-making that most people have never considered. Here is the core problem. Speed and maneuverability are not the same thing. In fact, raw speed becomes a liability in close combat. A jet traveling at Mach 1.5 cannot turn sharply. The physics won't allow it. The faster you go, the larger your turning radius becomes. And in a dogfight, turning radius is not a performance number. It is a survival variable. When two aircraft enter a close-range engagement, the goal of each pilot is not to go faster than the other. The goal is to point the nose of the aircraft at the other jet before the other jet can point its nose at you. Everything else, speed, altitude, energy, is in service of that single objective. And achieving it almost never involves flying in a straight line. To understand why, we need to establish the actual numbers involved. A modern fourth-generation fighter like the F-16 has a maximum speed of roughly Mach 2. At that speed, the minimum turning radius is measured in kilometers, several kilometers. If two jets are separated by 3 kilometers and one is flying straight at Mach 2, it will overshoot the other aircraft before it can complete a turn. The F-16 generates a maximum sustained turn rate of approximately 9 degrees per second at optimal speed, which is not its top speed, but a carefully calculated corner velocity, typically around 450 to 500 knots. At corner velocity, the aircraft achieves the tightest possible turn. Above that speed, the turn rate decreases. Below it, the aircraft loses the energy needed to sustain the turn. The F-22 Raptor, with thrust vectoring, can sustain even higher turn rates and point its nose independently of its flight path. This capability is called post-stall maneuvering. But even the F-22 does not fly straight in a close engagement. The geometry of the problem does not allow it. This is where a fundamental misconception about dogfighting needs to be corrected. Most people imagine one aircraft chasing another. Faster jet catches slower jet, fires, and the engagement is over. This model is wrong. It describes a pursuit curve, which is one of the least effective geometries a pilot can fly in a dogfight. A pursuit curve is exactly what it sounds like. The attacking aircraft points its nose directly at the defending aircraft and chases it. The problem is that the defending aircraft, if it turns, forces the attacking aircraft to continuously adjust its heading. The attacker is always pointing at where the defender is, not where the defender will be. Every turn bleeds energy. The faster the attacker goes, the wider its turns, and the easier it is for a tighter turning defender to force an overshoot. The geometry pilots actually use is called a lead pursuit, pointing the nose ahead of the target, predicting its future position. But even lead pursuit is simplified. Close-range engagement is a dynamic negotiation of angles and energy states. It is governed by two concepts: angle off and angular rate. Angle off is the angle between the attacker's and defender's flight paths. 0 degrees means flying in the same direction. 180 degrees means flying directly at each other. In a dogfight, angle off changes constantly. Managing it is the central cognitive task of the pilot. Angular rate is how quickly that angle is changing. Forcing a high angular rate makes it nearly impossible to achieve a weapon solution. Weapons require a period of tracking. If the geometry changes faster than response time, the shot cannot be taken. Fighters maneuver to control the rate at which the geometry is changing. Every maneuver is a response to a geometric situation. The rolling scissors is used when one aircraft has overshot another, when it has flown past and is now in front. The pilot rolls and pulls, trying to slow the angular rate and force the opponent to overshoot in turn. It is an energy trade. The pilot sacrifices forward speed and altitude energy to change the angular relationship and regain control. The Immelmann turn, a half loop followed by a half roll, is used to reverse direction while gaining altitude. Altitude is stored energy. A jet that climbs during a disengagement is converting its kinetic energy into potential energy, which it can recover later by descending. A jet that flies straight and fast at low altitude has nowhere to go if it needs to escape. The high yo-yo is a maneuver used when an attacker is gaining too quickly on a defender and risks overshooting. The attacker pulls up, climbs briefly, and uses the altitude gain to reduce closure rate without turning away from the fight. It maintains the offensive position while managing the energy problem. Each of these maneuvers is a solution to a specific physics problem. The pilot's ability to recognize the problem and execute the solution faster than the opponent determines the outcome of the engagement. Energy management is the framework that connects all of these maneuvers. In fighter combat, energy refers to the total mechanical energy state. It is the combination of its kinetic energy, which is its speed, and its potential energy, which is its altitude. Together, these define what the aircraft can do next. An aircraft with high energy has options. It can accelerate. It can climb. It can sustain a tight turn for longer. An aircraft that has bled its energy through hard maneuvering has fewer options. It may be slow and low, a position from which recovery is difficult and, in combat, potentially fatal. The energy maneuverability diagram developed by John Boyd and Tom Christie in the 1960s formalized this relationship. An EM diagram plots the specific excess power of an aircraft, its ability to accelerate or climb, across speed and altitude combinations. By comparing the EM diagrams of two different aircraft, you can identify which one has an advantage at any specific energy state. Boyd used this framework to derive the OODA loop: observe, orient, decide, act. The pilot who completes this cycle faster than the opponent consistently achieves a better geometric position. The ability to maneuver quickly is only useful if the pilot can also think quickly, recognizing the geometry and selecting the correct response. This principle extends beyond mechanics. It describes the cognitive tempo of aerial combat. The pilot who forces the opponent to react, who creates geometry problems faster than the opponent can solve them, controls the engagement. There are limits to what maneuverability can achieve, and they are worth understanding precisely. At very long ranges beyond visual range combat, close-range maneuvering becomes almost irrelevant. Modern radar-guided missiles can engage targets at distances of 100 kilometers or more. A missile traveling at Mach 4 with active radar homing does not care about the geometry of a scissors maneuver. At those ranges, the fight is about radar systems, electronic warfare, and missile kinematics, not turn rates. This is why modern air combat doctrine places heavy emphasis on avoiding the close-range engagement entirely. The preferred outcome is to detect, engage, and defeat the opponent before either aircraft can see the other visually. The dogfight represents a failure of the beyond visual range engagement, a situation where missiles missed, were evaded, or were never fired. When the geometry collapses into close range, turn rate matters again, but even then, the physics imposes hard limits. At altitudes above 30,000 feet, where the air is thin, sustained turn performance degrades significantly. The aircraft that turns at 9 degrees per second at low altitude may manage only 5 or 6 at high altitude. Energy bleeds faster. Recovery takes longer. The margins are smaller. At very low altitudes and high speeds, the structural limits of the airframe become the constraint. Modern fighters are designed to withstand 9 GRU, 9 times the force of gravity, in sustained maneuvering. Exceeding that risks structural failure. The airframe will break before the pilot can push it further, and the pilot will lose consciousness from G-induced hypoxia long before the airframe reaches its limit, which is why modern fighters use G-suits that compress the lower body and delay the onset of blackout. High-G maneuvering is always a race against the pilot's physiology as much as the opponent's geometry. So why don't fighter jets fly in a straight line during a dogfight? Because a straight line is the worst possible solution to the geometry problem. A straight line path is predictable. It offers no control over the angular rate between the two aircraft. It cannot respond to an opponent's maneuver, and at the speeds a fighter jet is capable of reaching, flying straight guarantees an overshoot, a transition from attacker to defender, in seconds. The curving, climbing, reversing flight paths of a dogfight are not chaos. They are geometry in motion. Each maneuver is an answer to a specific question. How do I control the angle between us, preserve my energy, and reach a position where my weapons can be brought to bear before the opponent reaches that position first? It is not about speed. It is about rate of change. The pilot who controls how fast the geometry between the two aircraft evolves, not the pilot with the faster jet, is the one who controls the fight. If you're thinking about how this changes when missiles are involved, when the weapon itself can maneuver independently of the aircraft, that's a different problem entirely. The geometry of a missile engagement, the concept of a no-escape zone, and how pilots attempt to defeat a missile that is already in the air, I've covered that in another video, because once a missile is in the air, the pilot is no longer managing the geometry of two aircraft. They are managing the geometry of three.